When Ike's lustful gaze fell upon her, she knew her fate was sealed. She became a pawn in his game of power, a possession to be used and discarded. Adama witnessed the suffering of other wives, the despair of mothers whose sons were taken as soldiers, the heartbreak of women who were taken from their husbands, or those who were taken and their husbands eliminated. Adama stole into the king's chamber. She cradled Kamalu in her arms, his tiny fingers gripping her thumb, and with tears in her eyes, she fled the palace. In the ancient lands, somewhere in eastern Nigeria, in a kingdom that laid in between two hills, and the air hummed with ancient secrets, there lived a girl named Adama. At 15, she possessed a spirit as fierce as a lion. But fate had other plans for her. The land of Isindu was ruled by a tyrant king named Ike. His cruelty knew no bounds. He was a man of insatiable appetite, not just for power, but for everything he desired. He terrorized neighboring villages at will, and no one was able to question him or rise up to him. His guards, soldiers, and subjects lived in fear of his tyranny. He seized lands and farmlands, took wives and daughters for his own, and sons for slaves and soldiers, without a second thought. His reign was marked by despair, and anyone who dared to oppose him met a swift and brutal end. Adama was an only child. Her family had once owned fertile fields, but they were now reduced to tenants on their own land. Her father, a proud warrior, had been slain by King Ike's soldiers when he dared to question the king's action. Her mother, broken and defeated, had become one of the king's many wives. Adama was able to hide away on the day her father was killed and her mother taken. But she wasn't able to stay hidden for long before the king's soldiers caught up with her, and she was thrust into the harem as the 99th wife, chosen not out of love, but out of the king's insatiable desire for more. When Ike's lustful gaze fell upon her, she knew her fate was sealed. She became a pawn in his game of power, a possession to be used and discarded. But Adama was no ordinary girl. She harbored a fire within, a determination to defy her oppressor. She learned the act of survival from her mother and other wives. As days turned to weeks and weeks to months, Adama witnessed the suffering of other wives, the despair of mothers whose sons were taken as soldiers, the heartbreak of women who were taken from their husbands, or those who were taken and their husbands eliminated because they dared to oppose, and the despair of daughters forced into servitude. She refused to succumb to the fate that awaited her. She endured the king's unwanted advances and cruel words. King Ike seemed for some strange reason to take exception to her attitude of rejection and bid his time with her. There was a whispered secret through generations. They spoke of a prophecy, a child who would bring about the king's downfall, a child who was destined to bring light to a kingdom shrouded in darkness. King Ike, paranoid and consumed by fear of the prophecy, sought to eliminate any chance of its fulfillment. He forced himself on Adama, hoping to sow the seeds of his own heir and prevent the birth of the prophesied child. Yet, fate had other plans. Adama and the other wives were terrified to discover she was with child. The baby would be eliminated by King Ike if it was a boy. Months passed, and Adama's belly swelled with life. And at 9 months, in the dead of the night, she brought forth a son amidst the king's 215 daughters. The king's rage knew no bound, as he ordered that the child be taken from his mother and brought to him. Adama was heartbroken. The prophecy haunted her. She knew that her son Kamalu was the prophesied child, the key to their salvation. But how could she protect him from the wrath of a king who would stop at nothing to maintain his grip on power? Then, 2 nights after the baby was born, when the palace slept, with the help of 2 guards, Adama stole into the king's chamber. She cradled Kamalu in her arms, his tiny fingers gripping her thumb, and with tears in her eyes, she fled the palace. She sought refuge in the ancient forest, where the spirits of their ancestors watched over them. For days and days, she remained in the forest with her son, feeding on wild fruits. On 2 occasions, she heard people walking and talking in the forest. They were King Ike's men, and they had been searching for her. Kamalu's cries blended with the rustling leaves as she hid him from the king's wrath. When she was certain there was none of the king's men to catch her, she took her son and left the forest. She walked for so many hours, but finally she came to a small village. By the time she got to the village, she was exhausted and she had blisters on her feet. She met an old woman, Nne Akwaugo, who took them in without a question. She was very nice to Adama. Nne Akwaugo, as she was popularly called by the villagers, was a widow who had no children. So she was very happy for the company Adama and her son brought. Years passed as mother and son lived in hiding. Kamalu grew under Adama's tutelage. She taught him justice, compassion, and the duty he owed to his people. So as years passed and the young man grew, he carried within him the hope of a people yearning for liberation. Meanwhile, back in Isindo, King Ike was restless. He had executed the guards who were on duty the night Adama escaped. He had also eliminated Adama's mother and 4 other wives who were very friendly with Adama for conniving with her to escape. For years and years, he sent his soldiers into the forest and neighboring villages to seek out the woman who dared to defy him. But on each quest, the soldiers came back empty. Some of the soldiers were brutally punished for incompetence. Kamalu grew into a formidable young man. At 18 years, he had learned how to defend himself and how to use a sword. His mother's stories fueled his determination, and he was ready to confront his father. Adama had also told her son of a rumored charm Ike wears around his neck. It was said that the charm granted him supernatural strength and the ability to command the elements and the power to silence men with mere glance. She had remembered seeing some sort of a talisman around his neck, but she thought nothing of it. Rumor also had it that to overcome King Ike, you must first disarm him. Nne Akwaugo had died 4 years after she and her son came to live with her. Adama missed her and wished she was around to give her some words of wisdom and blessings. But she knew the time had come to confront the tyrant king who had held her people in chains for too long. They got to the village at night to prevent the news of their return from reaching the king. She went to an old friend of her father, Mazi Udo. Mazi Udo was happy to see them. He took them in. With his help, Adama and Kamalu were able to secure the loyalty of some of the king's guard. A plan was put in place to take King Ike unaware. 6 days afterwards, the plan was set in motion. The moon hung low in the sky, casting a glow over the palace. Kamalu stood in the company of guards who had secretly pledged their loyalty to him. King Ike's rule had been one of terror and darkness, so a lot of people were willing to help. Adama used herself as a bait. Her heart raced as she slowly and quietly approached the bed. King Ike was asleep. She reached for the talisman on his neck, her fingers trembling. Ike stared and his eyes fluttered open. Adama froze and her breath caught in her throat. But before the king could react, Kamalu was there, swift and silent. He lunged at the king and tore the talisman from his neck. It clattered to the floor. Ike's eyes widened in shock. His strength wavered and he struggled to rise. Adama seized the moment and shattered the talisman. But King Ike was not yet defeated. He lunged at Adama, his fingers closing around her neck. Kamalu moved fast and hit him hard from behind. Ike screamed and fell to the ground. By morning, King Ike regained consciousness and found himself tied to a tree in the middle of a palace, and the people chanting Kamalu's praise. Adama, Kamalu and the rest of his subjects were there too. The people waited for justice, for Kamalu to end the life of the tyrant who had brought nothing but pain and misery to Isindo for decades. But Kamalu spared his life and banished him from the land, with a promise to kill him if he ever returns. With his hands bound behind, he was escorted out of the borders of the kingdom into the deepest parts of a forest, and the people followed behind, chanting his downfall. The kingdom erupted into jubilation, the people rejoicing at the dawn of a new era. Kamalu ascended the throne with his mother, Adama, by his side. The woman who had defied destiny and birthed a legacy of hope. Under Kamalu's rule, the kingdom flourished once more. The farmlands and lands returned to their rightful owners, and families reunited. Lessons to learn from this story. Courage can change the course of history. Sacrifice made for a greater cause can lead to transformative outcomes. Our faith in someone or something greater can drive us towards positive change. Unity and shared purpose can lead to liberation. Revenge perpetuates suffering, but forgiveness and justice can pave the way for healing and progress. Leadership should prioritize a people's well-being. Thank you so much for listening to my story today. I hope you enjoyed it. Please let me know your thoughts in the comment section. And if you did enjoy the story, please give it a like, okay? Hit the like button. It helps our channel to grow. And you can always share this video with others who you think will enjoy it. I will see you in my next story very soon.